Good morning and welcome to our Embracing Change, How to Pivot Your Business in Changing Times webinar, presented by the Florida SBDC at UCF and sponsored by TD Bank. Thank you, TD Bank, for making this webinar possible today. My name is Jessica Ali, and I'm an Associate Consultant and Program Coordinator at the Florida Small Business Development Center at UCF, and I'll be helping with tech support. The webinar today is presented by Sharon Smith and Michael Towns, both consultants here with the SBDC at UCF in Orlando. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. Before we get started, I'd like to give a brief overview of who we are at the SBDC. The Florida Small Business Development Center at UCF is an economic development organization that exists to help small businesses grow and succeed, and we serve an 8-county region. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and are partially funded by the US SBA, State of Florida, and other local support organizations and community partners. The SBDC has been around for 45 years here in Florida, and we have offices throughout the state, ranging from our headquarters in Pensacola all the way to the Keys, with each region being hosted by a university. In Central Florida, we're hosted here by UCF. Our services include no cost one-on-one consulting in all different areas of business, and normally in person, but now virtual, seminars on various business topics and strategies. Before I pass it off to Sharon and Michael, I'd like to cover a few basic housekeeping rules. Your mics are muted by default, but if you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions chat box in the GoToWebinar panel at any time. We'll be taking questions throughout the webinar, and we'll also be addressing them towards the end. So please take advantage of that questions chat box. Please don't use the hand raise feature. Again, we'll just use that chat box today. Evaluation surveys for this webinar will be emailed to you shortly after the session. So please check your inbox and submit your feedback as soon as you can so we can improve our future offerings. We really value your feedback. And finally, a recording of today's webinar will be available on our YouTube page in the next few weeks. I'd like to thank you all again for joining us, and without further ado, I'll pass it to Sharon and Michael.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Smith. It's a pleasure to meet you. We appreciate your time today. My background is that I have been, for the past 30 years, I've worked in corporate America for 2 very large companies. I'm a native Floridian, having spent most of my life in Central Florida. And my background and skill set is business development, sales, and marketing. And the reason why this topic is so passionate for me is that I have withstood the test of time, and I've gone through probably 15 to 20 restructures over time and had about 35 different managers. So change is near and dear to my heart, and I look forward to talking with you all about this topic. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-consultant, Michael Towns, who I've had the pleasure of working with several clients, probably that are on the phone right now. Michael?
Thank you, Sharon, and I'm excited to be here today talking about a subject that is both near and dear to our hearts as well. Change is inevitable, no matter what we do. We've just been through a pandemic, so we'll be talking about that a little bit. My background is 30+ years in sales and marketing and business development as well. I've owned my own business, so I've been right there in these folks' shoes, understand exactly what they're going through. So we're going to talk about a lot of things today, Sharon, so let's get started. I'm excited.
Sounds great. All right, so like Michael said, a change is the only constant, and you know, that may be something that you've heard and stood by, but what's most important is that when you think about change, it's not about dwelling on the old or trying to hold on to the old. You've really got to shift all of your energy into building the new and in looking forward, and that's what we're going to talk about today. When we started thinking about this topic, it was way before COVID struck. And with my background, I had been with organizations that over time focused more and more on change management and taking organizations through change and why change was so critical. And I've seen it in both my business and personal life, and COVID just made that more front and center. So what we'd like to talk to you all about today is several deliverables that you heard and read about in the overall intro, right? We want to help identify consumer and customer trends for small businesses, really discuss and understand fears, challenges, and opportunities that organizations have, teach you all as leaders in the organization how to demonstrate a change mindset, how to really help your organization have an innovation mindset, and how do you foster that? And as business owners and business leaders, how to influence and lead change with your organization. So, you know, it's got to be leader first, by example, and it's very difficult. And I'm sure a lot of you all are sitting here struggling right now with, you know, you need to change, you know where you need to change, and you just don't know how to start moving that direction. So we'll help you there. We'll talk about common types of organizational changes, and most importantly, the process of change. What exactly needs to take place and when, whether it's small changes or a significant pivot. And then what do you anticipate will be roadblocks? Before you ever even start, know that there's going to be starts and stops, 1 foot forward, 2 steps back. How do you plan for those in advance? We won't cover everything involved in these topics today.
It would take all day, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. But our goal today is just to spark interest and for you to follow up and learn more through the SBDC. And also to help you identify, to help you look at trends in the industry, trends nationally, what happened in 2020, what's going to happen in, you know, 2021 and beyond, and just have you start thinking more strategically about where you need to take your organization. And most importantly, we've got so many resources at the SBDC that you can tap into, and we want to talk about those and what the clear next steps would be jumping off the call.
So let's talk about a poll here. We're going to pull a poll up and we're going to basically ask, did COVID positively or negatively affect your business? And if we'll take a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll get the results here in just a minute from Jessica, and we'll talk about that for a second.
The results are pouring in as we speak. Give it a few more moments. About 80% there, wrapping up in a couple more seconds. Give everyone a chance to respond. So we actually had 28% of folks online say that COVID actually positively affected their business, about 41% negatively, and 31% actually answered neutral, which I thought was very interesting breakdown. Sorry again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I think we've resolved that.
Great, great. Well, Sharon and I were discussing, and some people may have heard it, some people may have not, but you know, during our consulting over the last year, we've really seen that. You know, when intuitively you think that COVID would affect almost everyone negatively, but you know, we've talked to some businesses who've had their best year ever, and other businesses unfortunately are, you know, on the path to, you know, reorganization. So, you know, change affects people both positively and negatively. What I've always said in change is don't throw the good out with the bad. So you've got to kind of, you know, plow forward. So, you know, we've experienced a lot of changes over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, not just with COVID, but on a national level, we've had a new presidential election. We've had, you know, regulations that have come in or gone away. We've had supply chain issues. We've had a lot of businesses who tell us that they're having trouble getting things from overseas because of other countries being shut down. So then in Florida, you know, in Florida, we've had hurricanes for as long, I grew up here too, Sharon. I mean, every business needs to learn how to adapt to a hurricane, whether they're manufacturing, people coming and going to the offices, children at home, school, everything. So hurricanes definitely affect things. You know, we've talked to a lot of clients that are going through labor shortages, trying to find qualified candidates. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for work, but there's not the right fit or the right skill set. And then we've had a lot of rapid growth in Florida. I think I saw an estimate the other day that 1 million people have moved to Florida in the last year. And then I was at Costco the other day and it was raining, and I think 1 million people were at Costco trying to get ready for the hurricane that was coming. I think, you know, a lot of people that haven't been in Florida, you know, understand that, hey, I've got to get all these supplies.
And it's really crazy that these growing companies like the lawn services, like the cleaning services, the ones that are in high demand, they literally have waiting lists of clients and they can't bring them on because of the labor shortages. But then you're hearing about all the growth coming into Florida.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a very frustrating time, both for those businesses that are growing, as well as those businesses that have had a drastic reduction in employees because of COVID.
And a couple of the other things that have come up, we've heard, you know, minimum wage, you know, it's this tiered structure going up, automation in the workforce. I mean, we're going to different restaurants now where we see kiosks where we didn't see them before, you know, artificial intelligence, driverless vehicles, all this stuff is just rapid change. And how you adapt to that change is going to be whether you're successful in business or not.
You know, what's interesting, we'd like to kind of break down each of these segments, you know, the national, Florida, and the small business, and really drill down and look at each of these a little deeper. So as you look at what were the 2020 national business trends, it's kind of interesting. Some of these were projected and some shifted right during the middle of the year, right? Technology has always been a huge national trend. Automation, eliminating manufacturing jobs is something that's been happening for years. Millennials, 5 different generations all in the same workplace has really changed the way that hiring is going. Millennials are demanding flexible schedules, a relaxed office environment. As of March 2020, 31% were working from home, and March 2021, 16% of those, or over 50%, plan on continuing to work from home. So those trends are continuing to change. There's been this collapse of the corporate ladder. Sheryl Sandberg coined it the jungle gym in one of her books. But the days of having a linear career path where you knew, this was entry level, this was first level management, and this is how you were going to climb that ladder, it doesn't make sense anymore. Nobody's doing that. People are leaving companies every 2 to 3 years. They're going for more breadth and experience versus staying with one organization or staying in one function. And there's been this constant restructure and reorganization of companies. Like I said in my introduction, it's almost like once you've restructured, you're already planning for the next restructure. And the cycle of restructure with bigger organizations is every 2 to 3 years, which just seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
You're not able to even get your foot wet in your current role, much less make any sustainable contribution in a role. And then there's the continued aging diverse population in the state of Florida. We've been feeling this for a long time, but it's really impacting products and how you understanding your consumer and what their needs are. So we'd like everybody just to kind of pause for a second and think of of all these trends, which ones are really impacting your business? And are any of these causing you to need to do a major pivot, or are they just needing you to make some small changes? If you can maybe jot that down on a piece of paper or kind of just keep that in the back of your mind as we continue through this conversation, that would be great. So those are the 2020 trends, but where are we in 2021? So this is a super interesting article from the Harvard Business Review from January, and basically there's 9 trends that will shape work in 2021 and beyond. The first is, instead of just managing the work life of your employees, businesses are going to be expected to actually manage the life experience of their employees, which just seems crazy.
Yeah, it's generational.
Right.
It really is.
But think about how much more you're engaging, even working remote with people, you're starting to see their dogs, you're learning about their family, you're seeing what they do outside of work. And because of work hours and work location changing so much, now managers and owners have to think about holistically the whole life experience of their employees. The second thing is employees are expecting their the business owners and the businesses that they work with to be passionate about social and political debates, to engage in social and political debates versus 20 years ago, a lot of that was taboo. You just didn't talk about certain things like race or religion or any of those things at work. Now it's expected, and it's just a different generation that want their employers to be transparent, they want them to be honest, and they want them to be supportive of things that are passionate with them. The third thing is widening of the gender gap. That is an area that we were making progress in, right? For about 20 years, there was continued progress of, the number of female CEOs for Fortune 50 companies. And all that seemed like it was going in the right direction. Well, what's happening now after 2020 is there's actually a widening of the gender gap again. And the reason that's happening is women are needing to stay home more now to balance the workplace. And what's been proven, and it's kind of one of those myths, people automatically think, well, you have to be in the office, be seen and to be heard. And it's just easier for men to return to the workplace with the opening of these different cities across the country. Women, though, are still having to stay home to balance this whole transition, through COVID.
And the schools.
And the schools have,
work with school from home.
Exactly.
Someone's got to stay home with the kids.
But what's interesting is, they've actually done surveys, and they've determined that people are more productive versus less productive working remote, which is a very interesting thing to think about. And I just especially with small businesses, you definitely expect your employees most of the time to be there, visible every day. But it's certainly the ability to work in a hybrid environment is getting more and more attractive to people.
I think a lot of people are expecting that.
They are, especially the younger they are. They ask why do I have to be seen? I'm so much more productive in my own space, being comfortable to balance things like I need to.
Yeah, and that's a hard thing for some owners to appreciate. And obviously, if you have a manufacturing piece of equipment, it's hard to work from home. But maybe your bookkeeper or your accountant or your HR person wants to have that hybrid mode. Mm-hmm. Some owners feel like they have to see their employees to learn that. So
definitely. And then there's been so many new regulations. So these new regulations started monitoring employees, right? And it started, there became legal ramifications for learning too much about employees and workspace and monitoring on computers and monitoring people's time. So now a lot of companies bought software so they could monitor their employees, and now they're not able to actually use that software. They're being limited by regulation and actually moving forward in that new technology. Number 5 is flexibility will start shifting from where you work to when you work. So being able to say, I want to work, I'm most productive from 8 to 11. I want to work at night for 3 hours versus working from 8 to 11 in the morning. I'd rather do different things.
Yeah, we were on a call with a client yesterday that went to a 4-day work week, 10 hours a day.
Exactly.
So there's, you have to be, the employees are looking for that flexibility. So you may have to survey your employees to find out what's important to them.
And that's exactly how that company came to that
Absolutely.
Realization. They're a manufacturing organization, and they found that they were more productive having 4 10-hour days than having 5 8-hour days. So it's been very successful for them. Leading companies, this was a trend that they determined in January would be happening across the countries. Leading companies would make bulk purchases of the COVID vaccine, and then they'd be sued over the requirements. So it's been very difficult for large companies to know how to manage the whole vaccine element, which I know you all understand. Number 7, mental health support will continue to expand, and it will be the new normal. The taboos of not talking about, depression and anxiety in the workplace, hopefully those barriers are going by the wayside, and people are being much more understanding of what's affecting employees overall with their, their well-being. And I
just helping, giving resources.
Yeah, and I think we're really heading in the right direction. I feel great about some of the athletes and people who have stepped up, and they're starting to speak more about it. And then employers will look to rent talent to fill the skills gap. So it doesn't matter whether you're in New York or whether you're in Florida, every single business is looking for people. It's really crazy. And if you're not, maybe your goals and growth aspirations aren't aggressive enough, quite frankly. But now with remote work, instead of just like Central Florida being the pool of candidates or Florida being the pool of candidates, now employers are looking throughout the country. So you're competing now, not just with your competitors, within Central Florida, but competitors, everywhere for the same
Absolutely.
staff.
It's made it, in the past you'd have, 20, 25 candidates apply for a job. Now you can see upwards of 500 candidates applying for the job. How do you sift through all that to find the right candidate? How do you manage that time? How do you have the hiring process has changed, and just, working your way through all that stuff. So, you have to be ready to adapt.
One thing that I've shared out with a lot of our clients is it's a list of perks in the workforce, and I've found that it's super valuable. And if anybody would like to see that, I'd be glad to share it with you. Feel free to reach out to me after the webinar. But any kind of creative incentive that you can offer that sets you apart, that makes you unique and shows that you are looking creatively at benefits that you're offering employees is really critical, right? I mean, everybody's going to, within the next couple of years, be offering $15 an hour.
Yeah.
So you've got to do something different, something out of the box to set yourselves apart. And we've got some great ideas around that if you'd like to follow up with us. So those are the 9 trends. Again, similar to the trends of 2020. Think about, of these 9 trends, hopefully, you jotted down a few notes, and you can think more about how these are affecting your own business. And again, we can help you with how you might want to make changes in your organization or pivot as a result of any of these.
And I kind of let the cat out of the bag earlier when I was talking about generations, but I think really generations is huge in dealing with change, because I think, Sharon, different age groups react to change differently. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Absolutely. So we mentioned that this is the first time that there's actually been 5 different generations in the workplace. And so this chart shows you how those generations are defined. I think everybody's very familiar with millennials. We started talking about millennials about 15 years ago, and it was the buzzword, and everybody tried to understand and market towards those millennials. They were the ones that, you had to attract, you had to differentiate. But now it's really shifted to all about Gen Z. And Gen Z, for clarification, is the 7 to 22-year-olds, and they're drastically different than millennials.
Yeah, they think about this for a minute. That generation has never not double negative here, never not had a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
They've never been without technology. For us, a little older folks, we remember we would walk to school both ways in the hill and the snow and all that. But these guys have never not had a smartphone in their hand.
Come on, Michael, you're dating yourself. But anyways, the Gen Z group was born in 1997 through 2012. And if you're not reaching out to them now, you need to be. That needs to be where you're now targeting your efforts. And the key characteristics of Gen Z, not only are they totally mobile, they're thrifty, they shop at Salvation Army, they try to do things on a budget, they try to stretch a dollar to the greatest degree they can, and they're up for a challenge. They demand that their brands speak to them on a level of honesty, that they bring to their interactions with the world, digital and otherwise. In most countries, Gen Zers spend roughly 2 hours longer than millennials on their phones. So 50 to 60% of their brand decisions are made on their phones.
So if you want to attract them as employees, where do you have to meet them? You have to meet them on Instagram. You have to meet them where they are, not Facebook like for us, right? It's Snapchat and TikTok and all of that. It's, you know, it's crazy.
And the other thing is they also represent the leading age of the U.S.'s changing racial and ethnic makeup. So, you know, if you look at who you're really trying to target to and trying to reach that diverse population, that is the fastest growing population, you've got to be talking to them on a social mobile perspective. So
Absolutely.
take note, if you're not maximizing that opportunity right now, you know, write it down, follow up with us, and see how you can move quicker in that direction.
And to kind of talk about that a little bit more is that, you know, each one of these generations expect different things from their employers. You know, the older you are, the more loyal you tend to be, right? You've stuck with the company for a longer period of time. These younger people, younger than millennials, expect more from their organizations. We talked about it for a minute where, you know, what are your differentiators as an employer? You're doing flexible work hours. Are you doing lunches, you know, once a week? Are you offering benefits? All these things that different generations require. And since there's a labor shortage, what are you doing to differentiate yourself to try to bring these different generations in? So it's time for a poll again, I think.
Another poll.
Another poll.
Great.
Jessica, can you help us?
Absolutely can. All right, so we have a question for you. What changes are you planning in the next few years? You'll see a poll come before you. Please feel free to select any that apply. The results are pouring in. A few more moments. Last couple of seconds, we have almost everyone voting.
Oh, we actually have the results
All right,
on the
Sharon.
screen.
Yes, we do. All right, Sharon and Mike, it looks like 71% of our attendees plan to add a new line of business. About 55% are needing more staff. 71% are also planning on expanding their digital or social media platforms. About 10% have passing down or selling their business on their minds.
So everybody on the call is going to have some type of a major change, a new line of business. You know, you were doing one thing and now maybe something completely outside your box, or a new vertical or a new product or a new service that you're offering. Hiring more staff, that's awesome. Everybody looks like, you know, most people are looking like to expand their business. You know, that goes back to that generational thing that Sharon was just talking about. You may have to, you know, change your approach to each generation, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram or one of those things. Expanding digital and social media platforms. I mean, you know, meet your clients, meet your customers, meet your employees where they are. How do you communicate to the differentiators? Not too many people plan on selling their business, but that, you know, every business should have a plan, a plan for the future, right? Whether it's to sell the business, to pass it down to their children, that is change, and you need to be planning for that change, you know, as you go. You need to be building your business kind of like with the, you know, build it with the end in mind, right? We talk about that a lot. You know, if you're planning on retiring in 10 years, you know, think about that now. How is that business going to look? Who do you have to hire? You know, do you have to hire a number two? Do you have to train them? So,
you know, what's so interesting about that, Michael, is we work with so many great businesses
yep,
that have been successful because the owner is an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And I've heard you say, it's great, the business takes off and it builds for a few years very successfully, but then they reach a plateau.
Yep.
So if you're not thinking about that next level of how you develop a business plan and a succession plan and get more people involved in the business, then you're just missing out on a lot of potential growth.
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs are great at starting things, but once it gets to a certain level, it's almost like a maintenance mode and then a growth mode from there. So how do you, is it the same person? Do you need a strong number two to come in and kind of maintain the business where you're still the entrepreneur and grow the business? Those are all things that need to be talked about. Exactly,
and how they get their head out of the business.
Exactly. So let's talk about some businesses that you may or may not be familiar with. You know, does anybody remember MySpace? Do you remember, Sharon?
Okay, you're aging yourself,
Oh,
Michael.
geez. How about Alta Vista? Who is that? That's a weird name. We all probably know Toys R Us. You know, they were, you know, the elephant and.
I miss Toys R Us.
I know, it was so good. And they bought SEO Schwartz as well. FAO Schwartz, yes. And then Blockbuster. You know, everybody knows the story of Blockbuster. But what happened to these famous brands? Let's flip around and see what happened to those famous brands. MySpace was replaced by Facebook. You know, MySpace actually started first, but you know, they didn't have the same momentum that Facebook had. They didn't have the plan, the marketing strategy, the whole business acumen. So they got replaced by Facebook. Alta Vista, who in the heck is Alta Vista? They got replaced by, oh, I'm sorry, Toys R Us is next. Who's Toys R Us? Got replaced by Amazon. You know, especially during the pandemic. I mean, everybody had, you know, 10 Amazon trucks in their neighborhood, you know, delivering products. So, you know, people weren't wanting to go to a brick and mortar store as much. So now, you know, Amazon's taken over. So let's talk about Alta Vista. Alta Vista actually was one of the first search engines, and they got replaced by Google. You know, now Google is a verb and a noun. You know, let's Google something. Let's go find something. Can you think about, let's Alta Vista something, you know, if they just survived and had the business plan to make it. And then Blockbuster Video. You know, they were approached by the company that replaced them several years ago to say, hey, we actually want to partner with you and do an online version. And Blockbuster was a little bit arrogant and said, no, people want to come into our store to have the experience. But unfortunately, they were replaced by who, Jessica? They were replaced by Netflix. And now Netflix is having to adapt and change as well. You have Disney Plus and you have Hulu and you have all these other Amazon Prime coming on board. So now they're having to develop their own streaming services and their own content. It's not just enough to have the old episodes of Friends, but you have to develop your own programming. So even in just a couple of years, Netflix and Amazon have evolved. So, you know, don't be one of those brands that is on the list that says, we remember when, you know, adapt and change and stay abreast of the situation constantly and understand your industry and understand the marketplace, or you will be replaced, whether you're a small business or a large enterprise. Right, Sharon?
Absolutely, Michael. I have a great example of a company that did change and it helped their business tremendously. And you know, back in the early 90s, I was working for Pepsi, and they knew that they needed to change. They were losing share. They were not as relevant as they had been. They weren't diversifying. They weren't adding new brands. They weren't growing. And they started getting really negative feedback from their customers and clients.
They wanted to be what they perceived as more healthy as well, I think.
Well, absolutely. That was all happening. That was emerging, right? And so they pulled in all of the managers around the country into Dallas. And I'll never forget being in this huge convention hall, and the leadership at the time was led by a pioneering female named Brenda Barnes, who at that point in time, I think she was the only chief operating officer that was a female. Wow. For any Fortune 50 company. So that in itself was really groundbreaking. But I'll never forget her standing up in front of thousands of employees and frontline managers at the time and telling us that they had a burning platform And I remember being a skeptic in the audience thinking, how can a company this big have a burning platform? And what do you mean by burning platform? And you all probably heard that analogy before. It's where imagine a fire on a platform or on a building, and it basically is forcing you to jump, right? Things are caving in around you and you have no choice other than taking a leap. And once you take that leap, there's no going back. Yeah. And that was what they were trying to convince everybody of. And they showed share information on customers lost. They showed the trends, to your point, of better for you products. They showed margin and revenue declines and basically said, we need to flip this company upside down. We need to put the frontline employees and those closest to the customer and the customers at the top. And the senior executives need to be at the bottom. And it was really a revolutionary concept at the time. They explained it all to us, and they gave us these pyramid pins, which you can see on the screen, and you know, like trophies to take back with us. And it was a great, really inspiring meeting. And then we all went back, and it was just tough. You know, it was really tough to change a culture. And it took several years to really help people understand. But they had to totally restructure how they incented employees, how they talked to employees, how they worked with employees, how they rewarded managers for doing something right. And it's really pretty interesting because it did take hold, but it took a lot of work. And this book, Taking People With You, explains that if anybody's interested in learning more about it. But what it did enable was Pepsi to shift their portfolio much faster than their competition in the US to better for you products. They started rewarding and calling people out for doing something right, for putting frontline performers first. It was the philosophy that we saw during COVID, you know, with the frontline, but this was 30 years ago. It was very revolutionary. And it really did change, you know, the way that I looked at the business, and it forced managers to walk the talk.
Yeah, and Pepsi was not one of the logos that disappeared on the screen. So they adapted, they changed, and they're continuously doing that.
Absolutely.
And you think a huge company like that, like you said, it takes years to change. Even in a small business, it takes time to change. I mean, the owner has a mindset, you know, I grew this baby from the ground up. Now I've got 20 employees. And sometimes the owner feels like they're losing control of the business. As you hire more employees, you have to give a little piece away. So in small business shifts, it's really cool that during COVID, we heard some great stories. You know, we had some sad stories too. We had some businesses that quite frankly may or may not make it. And, you know, we are in the center of tourism in Orlando. And, you know, tourism was basically shut down. And, you know, we really had hotels, Disney World, Sea World, all these attractions shutting down. And a lot of the small businesses in our community rely on tourism for their business. So we had a lot of clients calling us up saying, hey, Michael, hey, Sharon, you know, my largest client is Disney. My largest client is SeaWorld. What do I do? How do I pivot? And you're talking about 100% of their business being reliant upon that. And, you know, we talked some businesses through that. You know, we had some transportation companies that were used to transporting tourists from the convention center to their hotel or to an off-site venue, switched to non-emergency medical transportation. We had other businesses who were used to doing in-person live events, switched to virtual live events where they actually did gamification on these virtual Zoom meetings for corporations and associations. And they actually did better than they did in in-person meetings because they were able to go all over the world and not just in specific geographic areas. So maybe that company's on the line and they said they were doing better than they did when they were before COVID. You know, restaurants had to shift from, you know, in-person dining to you know, drive up, you know, pick up in the parking lot. You know, you can do that at Home Depot now. You can do that at Target. So if you're a small business, and you're having to compete against these large chains, you've got to, adapt to this, and you got to be fast on your feet. There's a story of a business. It wasn't one of our clients, but one of my clients told me this story. They were a restaurant, and this was right during the middle of the major part of the shutdown, and people couldn't go to the grocery store. People couldn't find toilet paper. Remember when we were short of toilet paper? And so this business owner said, what we're going to do is we have access to our supply chain that is still being able to deliver toilet paper and other necessities. I'm going to start taking online orders from our customers to deliver toilet paper, to deliver raw food that they could cook at home. So, that is a major shift. So what are you going to do, for the hurricane that comes up? What are you going to do for potentially the next challenge that comes up? So these are things that you need to be thinking about is, what line of business is going to help make you more recession proof or more inflation proof, or staffing issues that come about? Are you going to do, artificial intelligence? So how do we embrace change, Sharon? What do you see us doing here?
Well, it's interesting because the research and advertising company Gartner said that the average business has undertaken 5 major changes in the past 3 years, but 75% of these companies expect to make a lot of additional changes in the next 3. So, the reason there's a lot of reasons for companies wanting to make changes, but it's believed that it will take the company to a higher level. It's going to make them more productive, innovative, and profitable. So I think we've sold our story and why it's important. But now let's talk about understanding the forces of change. There's a lot of things driving change externally that we've talked about within, the culture and across the U.S., Florida, and within the small business industries. But internally, pressures force change as well. So it could be internal competition. It could be these new regulations, or human resource organizations or benefits forcing you to make changes. It could be taxes, your accounting system. Employee turnover could be driving change. Sickness, sadly, we saw many people have to either shut down their businesses because of COVID, be short-staffed because of COVID, owners passing because of COVID. Sickness has become, a really big internal force of change. Partners splitting up, adding partners, succession planning, pivoting, technology, machinery, adding jobs, removing jobs, trying to, drive growth or manage growth. All these things force change. And there's really 2 types of change. I think people use the term pivot loosely.
Yeah.
Okay. Pivot is really when your core business changes dramatically, whereas there's adaptive changes as well. And those are those small incremental modifications that happen over time. So there's really 2 different things. And, if you add a new brand or a line extension, that's not a pivot per se.
Right.
That's not
but it is change.
That's not changing your core.
Right.
So just for kind of clarification there.
Yeah, because a lot of the businesses say they're going to add a new line. So just the fact that you may have to, develop processes and develop the people and all that, that's a change in the way you do business.
But whether it's a small change or a big change, never underestimate how change impacts your employees, right? There is this latent feeling or fear, dread, and anything taking people out of their comfort zone, right?
And you have to communicate.
Well, you have to not only communicate. I mean, I think this picture kind of says it all, and it's a pretty funny picture from The Office, but it tells 1,000 words, and I can only imagine what Michael Scott, Steve Carell was rolling out at the time. But obviously, the employees were having a hard time grasping it, whether it be arms folded, smirks, blank stares, wonder, concern or fear. There's resistance. There's lack of embracing change. So, the first thing you have to do is really develop a change mindset in your organization. And And that starts with you, right? It starts with the leader of the organization. And the way you can take charge yourself and to help your team navigate through this process is you've got to teach people not to fear change, but to actually seek it out and embrace it, which is a very different, methodology. Remember that change is inevitable. It's normal. Make it a normal process that you're going to expect change. Name it. Acknowledge, the changes that your organization is going through. Where you want to take the organization, how you want to change the organization in the next 3 to 5 years. Your frontline managers and your employees should know that, so they're not wondering and afraid of the future.
Get them involved. I think that's part of it too.
Absolutely.
Is getting your employees involved, have them take ownership of
Right.
the change,
Right,
and all of that.
Claim your sphere of the experience. Make sure your employees know how they can help impact change. Again, have them part of developing the change. Separate yourself from the experience, right? It's the change process, it's not the people. Ask for help, focus on being resilient, and then celebrate growth. And you've got to manage change when pitfalls, falls arrive. So don't, if you don't have a plan, don't pivot. If you're too fragmented in your focus and you need to go back to thinking about your core, don't pivot your business. If don't compromise just being, expeditious, take it slow and steady and make sure you've got a very, very well thought out plan.
Yep. So where do we go from here? Roads? We don't need no roads where we're going, right? We're gonna fly there. This is great from Back to the Future because, basically just going with the flow, just let change happen to you. Don't manage the change. You really can't do that as a business owner. So, there's a process of change, and, we're going to kind of go through the steps of the process of the change. And one is preparing for the change. We were on a call with a business owner that said, I do want to have a succession plan. I want to sell my business, in 5 years. Well, what does your business look like in 5 years? It doesn't necessarily look like it does now. So you got to prepare, identify what you want to do. Do you want to add a new line? Do you want to sell the business? Do you want to bring on new employees? So write that plan down. Like you said, Sharon, you can't just jump in with both feet. You've got to prepare. You've got to look at your budget. You've got to look at your finances. You've got to look at your current pool of people and say, are there people here capable, if I coach them and train them, to be able to manage this through? Do I have the right skill set? Do I need to bring in outside people? Understand the importance of change management, because whether it's a little change or a big change, over communication is key. Because what's going to happen is their employees are going to communicate with or without you. They're going to communicate around the water cooler, right? They're going to be talking behind your back. They're going to be, embracing the change in front of you and maybe talking bad about you behind the scenes. And you just don't want that negative tension. So over communication, get them to be part of the change if they can be, if they have the right skill set. If you're adding a new machine, have them help you research the machine to get the best equipment. If you're looking at a new HR software, have the HR to people actually evaluate the software so that they're part of the plan. Don't just throw this new HR package on the employees and expect them to embrace it. In the process flow, write down the steps of the process. If you're implementing a new software plan that's going to change your entire business, you can't just put a software in there and expect it to fix your problems. You have to have good process in place before you bring the software in. So really write that structure out and then measure your results. If it's doing well, make sure you're doing more of it and pivoting inside that where you have to. But if it's not doing well, if something's going off on a tangent, make sure you're going backwards and you're saying, okay, where did we go wrong here? What does the financial KPI look like? What does the human capital KPI look like? What does the sales KPI look like? What is the goal? Because if you say I want to hire somebody in 5 years in 5 years from now, That's a long time. What about 18 months? What do you have to do from a financial perspective in 18 months? You've got to really back that up to 12 months, because by the time 18 months comes along, you're going to have challenges hiring that person. So let's move on to the next thing, roadblocks. Roadblocks are things you didn't plan for. COVID. I mean, I don't think anybody really planned for COVID, right? So, in Florida, I think we have the hurricanes. So I think, more than likely, we're a little bit more prepared for change, but diversify. Make sure that you're not dependent on one client, the huge, elephant in the room. Diversifying, empower your people, and making sure that you eliminate roadblocks. If there's the right people or the wrong people, make sure you eliminate those roadblocks. All right, so it's time for another poll again. So Jessica, if you could bring that up, we'll give everybody a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. What roadblocks do you all anticipate your business will face, and how can the SBDC help? Couple more seconds.
Just a friendly reminder, we're going to have a few minutes for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you've got some questions, jot them down and we will take them in just a couple minutes.
Yes, we do. We already have some great questions in the chat box for you all. Looking forward to those. Okay, last couple of seconds. I see some votes still coming in. Give it one more second.
All right, so what do we have, Jessica?
So it looks like we have 44% say they have no strategic plan or marketing plan. 64% lack the bench strength they need. 44% feel like they have a weak online presence. 36% say they have no succession or business plan. I know the SBDC will be able to help there. Should we move on to some of those action tools?
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about,
pass it to you, Michelle.
Great. Let's talk about some of the tools that we have available to address those. And these are tools that Michael and I and our fellow consultants use every day with clients. The first is a strategic survey. So this tool basically surveys each leader on key areas of the business to identify areas of opportunity and to get them on the same page. So it helps create solutions to areas that may be deficient in the organization and help focus them on their different strengths. So it literally breaks down each area of the business, the financial aspect, marketing, sales, succession, teamwork, how much you actually work on developing yourself. And it surveys all the business owners or leaders and has them compare that information, which is really a tremendous tool. The next is a SWOT analysis that we use from everybody from a brand new business just starting out to experienced businesses that have been around for 10 years. And that looks at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, both internally and externally. And it helps you prioritize where you and your team should focus your efforts. The next is market research. And I can't emphasize how important this is and how, because of the SBDC being a sponsored by UCF, which is a research university, how much access we have to tools that you just couldn't get elsewhere. So, market research is just critical to know where the trends are in your industry, to understand what your competition's doing, to know where you should, geographically, where you should expand. And it's really critical to just learn more information on your target market, which you may not have a good grasp on. And then another tool, and these are 4 tools that I think are fantastic, but we've got multiple other tools available as well. A competitive analysis. So knowing your competition is key to identifying where you need your niches to be, where there's a point of difference, and just keeping tabs on trends and where your competition is going. That's critical. One-on-one consulting. So, you know, at the end, we'll give you the contact information to request a one-on-one consultant. It's free. It's a service with your taxpayer dollars that is unbelievable. You know, really valuable for your organization. Based on that survey that we just took, it looks like you need exactly what we're talking about.
Absolutely, we can help in any way. So let's take a few minutes to bring up the questions. Jessica, if you want to throw them at us.
Absolutely, we have a great question. So first question, in a true pivot, a core business change, what tips do you have for positioning and communicating to external customers and to the public?
No, I'd be happy to take it. And I think that it's interesting because going back to the PepsiCo example, the organization was very transparent to their customers, and they were also transparent to shareholders. They were transparent in press releases, and they took a lot of risk. So first of all, they defined exactly where they wanted to go. They wanted to put, you know, the customers first, and they put processes in place to survey their top customers to see if the improvements they were putting in place were working, whether they were taking hold. They included top customers and feedback on how the managers were doing. So they expanded the performance development review process to include their clients to give feedback on whether the managers were walking the talk. They put out there where their goals were in shifting their portfolio from just carbonated soft drinks to better for you products. And so they put their stake in the ground and said, we're going to grow, we're going to shift in this direction, and it's going to take 5 to 10 years, but this is where we're going. So they were very transparent internally and externally.
Absolutely. Well, for the sake of time, we do have some other questions which we can continue for those who would like to stay on, and I can also have our presenters follow up with individual questions as well. We did have a few more come in, but we are wrapping up at 11 o'clock. So for those who need to step away, I'd like to thank again Sharon and Michael for their time this morning. If you'd like have any follow-up questions that we won't get a chance to address today, we'd be glad to have a consultant sit down and talk with you more about individual circumstances. We will send you that information so that you're able to contact us and you'll be able to navigate to register for an appointment. We thank you all for attending. Be on the lookout for your evaluation survey, and we hope to see you again soon.
All right, thanks a lot.
Would you like to take one more question while we're...
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Sure.
Let's keep on going.
Keep on going.
Yeah. For those who are staying on the line, so we're talking about trends, and basically we're trying to prep to find a way to be a part of change, right? So could you guys talk a little bit more about how to prep yourself to lead change?
Well, there's a lot of good resources out there. I think, you know, there's a really cute book called Who Moved My Cheese about him and Haw. I think it's a matter of, you know, every cycle of life has changed, and especially when you own a business and it's your baby, and do you really want to change? And it really starts with, and Sharon talked about this for a minute, it really starts with how you're serving your customers. And your customers are two people, two groups of people, right? Your customers are really your employees and your actual customers. And I think a lot of business owners don't see their employees as customers, but we've talked about a lot today about generational and what people are expecting. And I think over communicating and getting their buy-in, and the question before, you know, how do I communicate change? Get your employees to help you do that. Get your customers to tell you what they want. I know I implemented some changes at the corporation I was at before, but I had my employees help design the package that we were going to communicate to the customers. So I think that they got buy-in, so they were able to go out.
That's great.
Also, at the very back of our PowerPoint presentation deck, which you all will get, is additional resources. So there's 10 books recommended. They're the 10 leading books on change management that may be an inspiration on how to move your organization forward.
Absolutely. Here those are. You all have a copy of the slide deck in your handout section. Well, out of respect for everyone's time, we will go ahead and we will follow up with any other questions that have come in individually. Please feel free to reach out to the SBDC. We have our speakers' contact information here as well. We'd be glad to partner with you in any way possible. And thank you all, everyone, for your time. And thank you again to Sharon and Michael for a wonderful webinar.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Thank you.
Look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thank you.